everyone, it's Maki here. Logistics is one of the most important elements on the battlefield. No matter how advanced a mobile suit is, it loses its combat capability once it runs out of ammunition or propellant. Even the greatest pilot cannot fight without food. Today, I would like to introduce a vehicle that handles what may be the most important aspect of warfare supply operations, the Medea. First appearing in the original 0079 as a transport aircraft operated by the Air's Federation forces, it has since appeared in various forms. In stories set in later eras, it reappears in modified forms. There is even an aircraft in Hathaway's Flash that bears a striking resemblance to it. Today, we will honor the Medea. In the final section, I will also examine whether the aircraft seen in Hathaway's Flash is actually a Medea. Please do not worry, as I will not be discussing any spoilers related to the story or mobile suits from the second Hathaway's Flash film. If you enjoy my content, please consider supporting my channel by joining the 99-cent monthly membership. As a thank you, you will receive a name badge and comment stamps. Now then, let's begin the analysis. The Medea is a transport aircraft operated by the Air's Federation forces. Depending on the source, it is sometimes described as a large transport aircraft and at other times as a medium transport aircraft. This does not mean that the setting is inconsistent or that there are multiple interpretations. During the one-year War of Universal Century 0079, the Medea was categorized as a large transport aircraft. However, as larger transport aircraft were developed and entered service in later eras, the Medea was eventually reclassified as a medium transport aircraft. The most famous example of this larger aircraft is probably the Garuda class. While its official cargo capacity has never been publicly disclosed, the Garuda is capable of transporting several times more supplies than the Medea. Also, the Medea that existed at the beginning of the one-year war was originally designed to transport older-style weapons and military equipment. Consequently, transporting mobile suits was not part of its original design concept. Improvements were introduced during the war, resulting in the appearance of the so-called late production type Medea. Although the Medea is a transport aircraft, it can take off and land vertically without the use of a runway. It takes off and lands using 5 large rotors. It then gains propulsion through the use of 6 jet engines. As it was designed strictly as a transport aircraft, it has almost no combat capability. It is equipped with a single anti-aircraft machine gun, but this weapon is not intended for active combat participation. As I mentioned earlier, a late production type of the Medea could carry newly developed containers. One of the Medea's major features is that its containers can be swapped out. This allows operators to select the most suitable container for the cargo being transported, enabling highly efficient transport operations. The most famous Medea is probably the yellow one. This Medea was dispatched to deliver supplies to the battleship White Base. Matilda Arjun was the commander of this Medea. She carried out the resupply mission to White Base under direct orders from General Reveal. However, the yellow Medea was extremely conspicuous. Even stranger is the fact that it had no escort units. At the time, General Reveal effectively held the position of Supreme Commander of the Earth's Federation forces. For a unit dispatched by such a high-ranking commander, the highly visible paint scheme and unusual formation composition seem unnatural. Some military historians have speculated that the yellow Medea was originally intended for rear area transport duties. The Metis deployed closer to the front lines were certainly painted in far less noticeable colors. By this point, the Federation forces had already begun mass-producing the gem, their mass-produced mobile suit. Admiral Wei himself speculated that the Gundam and white base were being used as decoys against the while Federation headquarters focused on producing the main force of mass-produced mobile suits. Perhaps to the majority of Earth's Federation military personnel at the time, white base was already considered an unnecessary asset that had fulfilled its purpose. In fact, there is a scene in the story where a military officer remarks that white base is a troublesome existence. It is possible that no one within the military was willing to arrange an official supply unit for white base. One interpretation is that General Reveal, who was interested in the idea of a new type unit, arranged whatever transport forces he could independently mobilize to support white base. But the truth remains unknown. Ultimately, it is left to each viewer's own interpretation. The Medea was most commonly operated by supply units, of course. It even had an operations briefing room inside. The Medea was designed so that a transport unit composed entirely of Metis could conduct military operations independently. It was also possible to store a military vehicle, known as a container car, inside the cargo container. This was essentially a transport container on wheels. Using this system meant that supplies delivered by air could be rapidly transported over land routes. However, using this container car system reduced the total amount of cargo that could be carried compared to normal operating conditions. As mentioned earlier, the late production type Medea introduced several additional modifications. Its cargo capacity was increased. Consequently, the aircraft itself also became larger. Additionally, the rotors used for takeoff and landing were replaced with jet engines. Furthermore, 2 additional jet engines were added to the wings. However, the late production type Medea could no longer swap containers. There is no official explanation for this modification. Perhaps the redesign required for transporting mobile suits made the cargo space large enough to handle all types of supplies, rendering interchangeable containers unnecessary. But this is only my personal interpretation. Some military historians have theorized that development of the Garuda class had already begun by the time the late production type Medea was created. Therefore, the interpretation is that the container exchange function was omitted. However, the official Encyclopedia Gundam officials dismisses this theory as pure speculation, without any supporting evidence. The truth remains unknown. Now, bearing all this in mind, let's take a look at the aircraft that appears in Hathaway's Flash. This is the aircraft used by Kenneth's Lex unit as they move between locations. It looks extremely similar to the Medea. However, at the time of writing this script, official information regarding this transport aircraft had not yet been released. Let's examine its features. The wings positioned towards the rear of the aircraft resemble those of the Medea. The jet engine-like components mounted on the upper section of the fuselage also resemble those of the Medea. However, this aircraft has 4 engines on each side, making 8 in total, a characteristic not seen on any previously depicted Medea. Also, the Medea had jet engines mounted beneath its wings. However, this aircraft does not have any engines mounted under its wings. Could it be a completely different aircraft with a similar shape? There is an interesting passage in the novel version of the Blue Destiny that may serve as a useful reference. It states that the name Medea had become a generic term used for vertical takeoff and landing transport aircraft operated by the Earth's Federation forces. While it may not share the exact same design as the Medea from the original 0079, it is possible that this aircraft could belong to the broader Medea classification. There are no scenes in the Hathaway's Flash movies showing this aircraft performing a vertical takeoff or landing. There is only a scene in which the landing is aborted midway through due to a terrorist attack. Is this aircraft truly a Medea, then? Or is it an entirely different aircraft that simply uses a Medea-like design philosophy? Exploring different interpretations is all part of the fun. Thank you very much for watching until the end. I'll see you again in the next episode.